welcome back to Flip Flops, brought to you by Treefish EDU. This is a YouTube series about flipped learning. Expect some laughs, some flops, and some tips and tricks along the way. My name is Eric Geis. I'm an ed tech coach, a podcaster with Nick, and I recently completed my doctoral degree in digital transformation in education.
And my name is Nick Johnson. I'm a high school chemistry teacher, also an instructional technology coach. Like Geis told you, I'm a co-host of Got Tech, the podcast. Most of all, I'm just an ed tech enthusiast that's excited to share some information about flipped learning with you guys today.
My name is Kyle Nemus. I'm an ed tech coach from New Jersey, also a co-founder of the Classroom Q. And again, really excited to be here on today's final episode.
Typically in Flip Flops, we have two of us on camera, but because this is our last episode, all three of us will be on camera. And we're going to get a little vulnerable with you today, and we're going to talk to you about some of our biggest fears of flipped learning.
Before we do that, though, I always like to start off each episode, and we'll continue this tradition for our final episode. Just some background information on flipped learning in case this is the first episode that you've decided to watch in our series. So flipped learning, it's an educational framework, and essentially it literally just flips that traditional lecture style teaching around. A lot of the times teachers oversimplify this in their minds as doing homework in school and schoolwork at home. And that is one way that you can do flipped learning. But to us, and what the theme of most of our videos sort of centers around, is kids gathering content digitally. And typically that's done with videos. And they can do this without having to be in class. And we like it because, of course, that then frees up class time for what I always refer to as the fun stuff, the projects, the labs, the hands-on things. And that's about the quickest recap of flipped learning that I can give.
That was good. And so what Flip Flops is, in case this is, again, your very first time, so the three of us have been flipping for a long time and made a lot of mistakes. So in this series, in every episode that you can see, is we really kind of explore something that we did pretty poorly, and in hopes that we can help all of you learn from our mistakes in a productive way. And so today, I'm kind of really excited about today's episode, guys, because I feel like everything so far has been really practical, how long to make videos, stuff like that. And so hopefully we've really been able to help out a lot of people who are thinking about flipping or flipping. But today, like you said, it's kind of a vulnerable one, right? We're going to really talk about what our biggest fears are, because I know for a lot of people, that's the biggest obstacle that stands in your way. It has nothing to do with technology or whatever it is. It's just simply, it's a scary thing to try something kind of pretty big and potentially overwhelming. So in today's episode, our final episode, we're going to share kind of what our biggest fear was, and before we started it, and kind of what happened along with that fear. So maybe, just maybe, if you're having the same fear, we can kind of help you out a little bit. So Eric's going to kick us off today and talk about his fear involving classroom management. So what do you got there, Eric?
Yeah, so I am not the most organized guy, but I do like to know, and I like to plan out things as far as control of the classroom. All right, I'm very laid back in the classroom, but I will say I do like to kind of have an idea where it's going to go. And the flipped classroom is totally different than the traditional classroom. The flipped classroom has a lot of moving parts. There's students at different stages of different activities. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of chaos. When students get into a flipped learning activity, it's chaotic. It's organized chaos, but it's okay. And for me, it was just, do I really want to dive into flipped learning knowing that there's going to be a fear of the unknown? And I just had to have a little bit of faith, not only in my ability to kind of punt on the fly, but also my ability as a leader to get students, through a new experience and together, learn together what's going to work in the classroom.
Yeah, I always kind of think of like teachers as sort of rule followers by nature. Of course, that's not true across the board, but that's why I think a lot of people go into teaching, is we like the structure. We like knowing what's going to happen and when, and the bell rings and it tells us when to go here. And your classroom is kind of like the ultimate autonomous zone, right? Like you're the boss of this world and you're in charge, and you know who's doing what at all moments and at any given time. And nobody makes a move unless you say it. And in the flipped classroom, you're right, dude. I'm glad you brought it up, because it's super scary to let that go. And you might feel like you will somehow lose control of that sort of precious classroom management, or people will judge you for not being in control of your class. But it's important to mention that that doesn't necessarily happen, and you may actually see your classroom management improve too.
Yeah, I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that. I will tell you a quick story, if I may. I had a supervisor or administrator of mine walk by and kind of peek their head in and say, "Hey, you guys are like all into this, and you're very loud. How do you do this? What's going on?" I said, this is learning. Take a look. Listen to what they're getting passionate about. This is doing some good stuff, and it took me a while to realize that and reflect on that. So definitely bring in some reflective practices as you start this journey on flipped learning.
Yeah, I know for me as well, I had the same fear about classroom management and kids all over the place. And I do like a little chaos, and I wouldn't say I am someone who follows the rules. So I wasn't super scared of it, but at the same time, I don't know about you guys, but I actually found that the students who potentially acted up a little bit more when I used to lecture, like those kind of type of kids, didn't. And I think part of that is because they were able to maybe go at their own pace, and probably they're disrupting the class for just not being able to learn. So it's easier to disrupt the class, but also you kind of took away their audience a little bit when kids are all over the place doing different things. There's not just this big audience for some of these kids who kind of like to potentially disrupt the class a little bit. So for me, I would actually say my management improved, even though I'm with you, it looked a little crazier, but overall I feel like it was a lot more positive chaos than just negative chaos, I guess. So here's my fear. So I work in a middle school, and actually there's a couple teachers I knew who were already flipping, and they only did it for their highest level students. They were math teachers, and they only did it for like the highest level. And they even said, listen, flipped learning doesn't work for the kids who maybe struggle a little bit. So I only do it for my top level math classes. And for me, who taught science, and I was heterogeneous classes, I didn't have different level classes. So that was definitely a fear of mine. It was like, are the students who potentially struggle really going to be able to learn now from a video as opposed to me talking face to face? So that was something I paid close attention to kind of see. And so I originally did the at-home flip like you guys did. And I'm going to be very honest, like that's actually exactly what happened. My students who struggled actually did struggle more. So my fear came to life, and it was not a fun day when I realized, like, well, this is exactly what I thought was going to happen, and it was terrible. So then, as I told you guys, I transitioned to more of an in-class flip, but I did it in class. And so to me, that made a big difference. So I'd say for anyone out there who's maybe scared of trying it and worried about your kids not doing it, the kids who struggle, for me, what really worked well was having them start watching the videos in class, because then it was really, really nice. Because, I mean, if I were to ask you guys right now, like, what's the best way to help a student who struggles? I mean, I imagine you're on the same page as me. As step one is build a relationship with that kid, right? So, and we've all said it in multiple episodes that flipped learning let you build some of those relationships that maybe you couldn't get to when you're up in front of the classroom lecturing. So it ended up in the long run, I'll tell you right now that after a couple of years of doing this, and after I figured out a bunch of kinks from that last episodes, that I was the only teacher in the science 7th grade who actually got students with IEPs and learning challenges because of the style of teaching, because they were able to watch the videos with their parents. They were able to watch it at their own pace because they were watching them in class. I could still have small group instructions with them and so on and so forth. So for me, that in-class flip really helped a lot, and the fear subsided once I was able to do that and have kind of some of those small group relationships. But I will say, actually, the students who struggled the most seemed to, in the end, benefit from it because they were always able to access it and have, able to kind of go at their own pace. I don't know if you guys had a similar experience or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head that you have to build relationships. And part of that, a big, huge part of that is communication and getting a safe space in the classroom. Letting them know that you're on the same team as them and that, we're all better together. That kind of vibe goes a long way in flipped learning. And really, I think it just helps them learn how to buy into community just a little bit more, because some of your success does have something to do with the person sitting next to you. In some cases, you're all working towards the same goals to get, roughly to the same spot based on your academic level and where everybody can kind of meet together.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up too with that the idea of just changing some of that structure of your class, depending on maybe what type of students you have, or that even just that particular group for that particular year. You said you kind of switched to that in-class flipped, where it's technically still flipped because they're watching the videos at their own pace to learn, but they can do that in class if the homework thing's not working out. I have I'm doing this sort of full time with my AP chemistry students this year, and they prefer to do it at home. These are kids that don't mind homework. They expect homework and they make time for it. So I can give them the videos to watch at home, and they can come into class having done that. But if that doesn't work for your group of students that particular year, you can build that into the class time as well. So I think these are all super important things to point out related to that. The level of your students kind of doesn't matter. It works for everybody.
Yeah, you actually reminded me of something that I've heard from teachers, like with the fear, because they say like, all right, if I send kids home to watch it and they don't watch it, then like I don't know if a kid actually got my lesson or whatever it is. But when I'm in class and I say it, I know they got the material. But like the reality is, like those kids who are struggling, like they're present physically, but like there's a good chance that they are nowhere near mentally where you want them to be during that class period anyway. But I think as a teacher, there's that comfort of knowing you said it to them, your words went into their ears, and then you're like, listen, it's on them if they didn't actually do it, which again, I don't necessarily believe in that. But I think that's a comfort thing too. Teachers feel very comfortable knowing that you said it, as opposed to like giving a video and hoping that they watched it or whatever it is. So it definitely, that was a big fear and took a little while to get over, that they understood the material, even though you didn't say it at them. There's definitely a kind of a leap of faith there for a little while as well.
Yeah, totally, man. And I guess this is a good time for me to introduce my fear with this, which is kind of strange, especially looking back on it now. It's one of those things where once you get into it, you realize that it should never have been a fear, from the beginning. But mine was, creating this content that is now pushed out there for the world to see forever. In theory, at least that's how it was in my head. So I'm picturing creating, some kind of a chemistry video. I put all my stuff on YouTube, and I know there's ways to avoid that. Like you could just have the video on your Google Drive or wherever, and then sort of limit who can see it. But at the time, and I still do this, all my stuff is on YouTube to be fully judged by everyone across the world. So that's students, that's other chemistry teachers. And I was really concerned about, delivering the correct content. I don't know if it's just because as a chemistry teacher, things are so technical, and none of this is my opinion. You know what I mean? These are like actual factual explanations for really complex stuff. And I just wanted to make sure that it was right. And it's, bring that into the AP world where it's not only correct, but it's, correct in the way that the College Board would like to see that answer explained or that phenomena. So for me, there's a lot of pressure for the content to be correct, to not make mistakes. And we've talked about this before in other episodes, but I'm kind of a perfectionist by nature. So even just like a typo, I can think of 2 videos right now, even just saying it, 2 videos where I have to.
You're sweating right now, aren't you?
Oh man, I know I've got typos, and it's driving me nuts just thinking about it. So just like little minor mistakes, I just wanted them to be like flawless. And these are things with my name. Like you can YouTube search chemistry by Johnson, and there's all my stuff. There's 450 videos by me, and I just wanted to have the best representation possible. So this was very stressful for me, and one of the things that was sort of putting me off from the very beginning. But as we've talked about before with some of our other flops, you let it go. It's okay. The imperfections actually they make it yours, and your students, just as if you were in class, they like that. And if you embrace it and make that part of your lesson, and then it can become just as valuable as it is in class when you make a mistake and you turn it into a joke, and everybody has a good laugh at your expense. So embrace that stuff.
Well, Nick, this is your educational or professional legacy we're talking about here. I mean, in 2120, there's going to be people looking at Chemistry by Johnson still then as a founding father of flipped learning content.
You're not helping my anxiety with these 2 typos.
I know they'll be talking about those 2 typos forever.
Yeah.
But you just said a really hard thing though, Nick, right? You said like, let it go, but you just proved yourself that like you've been 450 videos in and you still haven't let it go. And I'm not trying to call you out. I'm just trying to say that like, I totally get that. And so if you're a teacher and you're saying like, I could never do this because I don't like being seen and I don't like whatever it is, like it still might bother you. I think our message is like with all these fears is it's worth it, right? It's worth the little bit of anxiety with typos. It's worth the fear of classroom management. It's hard to let stuff go, but I think at the end of the day, we're trying to say that it's worth it for these fears.
Totally worth it. And it's sort of like the message I think that's most important here at the very end of our 7th and final episode is that And that's sort of been the theme this whole time. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there will be mistakes. And even if you've watched all of the flops in this series, you're still going to make mistakes. And the things that work for us may not necessarily work for you. I mean, Kyle's classroom is different than mine. We were just talking about it before we started recording today. We all have different structures that work for us and our personalities and our students. So you're going to have to sort of figure that stuff out. But our hope in sharing these episodes and these vulnerable moments with you guys is that you can avoid at least some of those pitfalls yourselves. So that's our message. Make sure to check out the previous 6 episodes of Flipped Flops if you haven't already. You can find them on treefishedu.com, or if you're on YouTube, which you probably already are, of course, just search for Treefish EDU and you'll find the entire series.